Hawley, 36 months, 3 years in prison for the various charges of tax evasion, tax fraud, and campaign finance violations. Want to go straight to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who is outside the courthouse. Pierre.
Georgia was a dramatic hearing. The judge basically said that Cohen had committed serious crimes, that he had been an officer of the court. He should have known better, that while he cooperated, that the crimes that he committed at the direction of the president and the tax violations and the campaign finance violations were serious crimes, George. It's been a dramatic morning. Cohen arrived at court, as you said, with his wife and 2 children. In court, he spoke to the judge. He made an impassioned plea to get leniency. He talked about the fact that he wanted to cooperate and try to do the right thing. But make no mistake, the President of the United States was front and center in this proceeding today. He talked about being in mental incarceration from the moment that he met the President of the United States, and that he acknowledged again that he did these acts at the direction of the President of the United States. He also talked about the fact that the President has been tweeting, talking about his situation, calling him a rat, and that he's the most powerful man in the world. But again, George, the judge was having none of it. He believes that Cohen should do prison time, 3 years in prison.
That's true, Pierre. On the other hand, this 36-month sentence is below the sentencing guidelines. So he was taking into account the cooperation that Michael Cohen gave.
Absolutely. The special counsel team was here today. They spoke on behalf of Michael Cohen today. They said that he had offered significant cooperation. But George, it's interesting, having covered a lot of these white-collar crimes and these type of things, the judges do sometimes give some leeway in terms of leniency to the defendants because of the nature of the crimes. But here, the judge clearly thought that that Cohen had lived a life of privilege, a middle-class life, and that, quote, he should have known better.
Yeah, he said it was a smorgasbord of crimes, and his cooperation does not wipe the slate clean. I want to bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, for more on this. And Dan, it was really a tale of 2 very different sets of prosecutors going before that judge today. You heard from the special counsels, Robert Mueller's counsel, Jeannie Reed, that Cohen provided valuable information. You heard from the Southern District of New York. He didn't come anywhere close to assisting this office in an investigation.
Yeah, and look, I think this 36-month sentence is a win for Michael Cohen, in particular because of what you just said. I mean, the Southern District of New York is coming forward and saying not only is the sentencing range 51 to 63 months, but we think he was still lying to us. He still wasn't cooperating with us. He's still making claims in his documents that we think aren't true.
But Mueller's team saying we think he told us the truth.
Exactly. And so it seems that here, when the probation department had recommended 42 months, which was a downward departure from the 51 to 63, the fact that he's now getting 36 months, I think is a win. Keep in mind, in the federal system, that means that he would have to serve at least 85% of that time, even with good behavior.
I was struck by something else that Jeannie Reed, the special counsel Mueller's attorney, said. She said he provided credible and valuable information regarding, and this is a quote I had not seen before from the special counsel, any links between a campaign and a foreign government. That shows this whole notion of the special counsel looking at conclusion very, very much alive.
Absolutely. You know, I reread through, as I saw that, all of the original documents here that they filed. And in none of them did they make that kind of statement, as the special counsel made, that he provided credible and valuable information about any links between a campaign and a foreign government. But if he's providing information that's been useful, you would presume that means there were links.
And
so this is us reading between the lines here, but it's important and it's significant, and it was a comment made not by the Southern District of New York, but by the prosecutor representing the special counsel.
And they said they have a lot more work to do as well. I want to bring in Lanny Davis, who's worked with Michael Cohen, worked as an attorney for Michael Cohen. Your reaction, Lanny?
Well, first, George, Chapter 1 on July 2nd began with your story where Michael Cohen turned and decided to tell the truth about Donald Trump and own up and take responsibility for his mistakes in representing Trump through the years. We're about to begin Chapter 2. Today isn't the last chapter. Chapter 2 is Michael Cohen. I'm now serving as an advisor. I no longer need to be an attorney with the sentencing over. Chapter 2 is Michael Cohen following what Mr. Mueller said, looking at the big picture as opposed to the Southern District, which was just focused on the crimes that they were investigating. We'll be telling the truth, not just to Mr. Mueller and all of his team, 70 hours in 7 sessions. He will someday be appearing as a John Dean II generation before a congressional committee and will tell all the truth about what he knows about Donald Trump. That's today's new chapter, and if you will, new headline, that Michael Cohen is now released to tell the full truth after Mr. Mueller makes his findings and issues his report. You will see more of Michael Cohen telling the truth about Donald Trump.
Lanny Davis, thanks very much. We should add that the judge also sentenced Cohen to two months for the lying to Congress. That was the charge he pleaded guilty to in connection with the Mueller investigation, but that's to be served concurrently with his 36-month sentence, which will begin by March 6th in Otisville, New York. I want to bring in Cecilia Vega as well at the White House. Michael Cohen, in his statement to the judge, hitting directly at President Trump, saying his only weakness was blind loyalty to the president.
And I'm struck, George, by just how much a part of this proceeding today President Trump actually was, even though clearly he was not there. And I will start by saying that we have not heard anything from President Trump. We are all monitoring his Twitter account very closely because I imagine it's just a matter of minutes before we do hear from him. In recent days, weeks, and months, the president has really tried to distance himself from Michael Cohen. And I have said this before, and I will say it again. It is impossible to overstate the closeness of their relationship here. We are talking about a man who was the right-hand man to President Trump, his longtime fixer, his personal attorney, someone who was in the inner circle inside Trump Tower for Donald Trump. And to hear Michael Cohen slam President Trump, to hear him talk about it, to point fingers directly at him today is frankly just astounding. You mentioned Michael Cohen talking about President Trump agreeing essentially that he is weak. And he says that his weakness was caused by blind loyalty to Donald Trump. And just a matter of days ago, President Trump had said that he called for a full and complete sentence of Michael Cohen. And really it was just overnight in this new interview with Reuters that he distanced himself even from these charges. You'll remember, George, his story has really changed. The president's story has changed significantly and very dramatically in months. Initially, he said he didn't know anything about these hush payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. And then he said he found out about them after they were made. And then he tells Reuters just overnight that this wasn't a campaign contribution. If it were, it was only civil. He says essentially that these sentencing report that was released on Friday cleared him of all culpability. That is not true so far. And we heard in court today that he is very much still a part of these allegations. In fact, the prosecutors today said that these campaign finance violations are serious because of the societal cost, George.
So striking, the president has been laying out his legal defense in tweets. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas there outside the courthouse. Pierre, that courtroom thick with emotion.
Cohen wept at least twice during these proceedings, clearly overcome with emotions. He was pretty silent, somber, as the judge read the sentence from what we're being told by our colleagues inside the courtroom. And George, I guess the other thing to remember here is of all the people so far who've been charged in connection with the special counsel investigation or any of these federal cases, he's getting the longest sentence. And from someone who's covered many of these cases before, it's always sobering when you see a judge impose that sentence and you know that this person is going to sit in a prison for months and in this case years.
Yes, Pierre, that's very true. And it's also clear, Dan Abrams, I don't know whether it's months or years, but these investigations are nowhere near over.
Well, that's right. And we were talking about the possibility that this investigation would wrap up by the end of this year. That's clearly not going to happen. We already know that part of the Manafort case has been pushed into next year. There are other aspects of the case that have been pushed into next year. And again, when you hear the kind of language that they continue to use, and remember, there's so much that's been redacted in the documents we've already seen, big black marks across it. Why? Because there's more to come that they don't want to disclose yet, but they're continuing to investigate.
Okay, Dan Abrams, thanks very much. Once again, Michael Cohen sentenced to 36 months in prison for tax evasion, tax fraud, and campaign violations. Campaign finance violations, as he says, were directly ordered by President Trump. That sentence just handed down at a federal courthouse in New York. We're going to go off the air right now. Our coverage will continue online, and of course, a full report tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.